If you would have asked me if my day was starting with revealing this video, I would have told you that this topic in particular is pretty far down on my list still, but it is something that I wanted to research. I'm not going to waste your time, we're just going to get right into it. Over the course of the last 24 hours, while researching the Hebra region for the purposes of finishing up production on the life and times of Mount Hebra, I inadvertently found the excavation site of Vah Medoh, and I'd like to share that with you today. Recently, a friend of mine, Gibora, or as I know him by Gabe, brought some ideas to my attention about the potential excavation sites, or burial sites rather, of Vah Medoh, and I was doing some research into that as a downtime for hung researching Mount Hebra and the Hebra region for the purposes of the Life and Times of Mount Hebra video. And if you're wondering if my downtime from research is more research, unfortunately or fortunately, the answer to that seems to be yes. I was in the process of ruling out other locations to try and see if the Barron snowfield was actually a good candidate for a location for Medoh. And I've been looking at pictures of Medoh and the wingspan and other designs and looking for potential places in the terrain that would work. And I had been very, very convinced for a long time that Medoh was in somewhere along Mount Hebra or in the foothills. And the reason being that there's a lot of overlap between, despite the key differences between Sheikah, tech, shrines, all of that, and Zonai, tech, and temples and shrines. I was fairly convinced that it would be somewhat near the Wind Temple, and that the Sheikah would have likely have chosen to bury it in a place that would be really sacred or important to the Rito, or that being said true for any of the groups, really. And while researching something totally different, I ended up stumbling onto this. So let's take a look at this. As you can see, the Giza crater site has these very, very equidistant craters for two of them on the sides of the central large one. And it wasn't until I been looking over this in Breath of the Wild just to make sure I wasn't, some of it is to not miss something because of the way that looking at the maps can sometimes, like the chasms and other okay, I'm just going to be really honest with you. Bright colors, I am very, very susceptible to getting distracted by shinies, so the Breath of the Wild map tends to be a little bit more neutral color-wise. So while looking at this, I kind of missed this at first on the Breath of the Wild map, and it wasn't until I went back to the Tears of the Kingdom map and I saw the holes that I had this Leonardo DiCaprio points at television moment of, oh my god, Vah Medoh's wings have the circular emblems on them and the bulbs on them. This is where Vah Medoh was, I bet. I wasn't sure if it fit, so naturally, I measured it. And I wasn't satisfied with measuring it, so naturally, I rebuilt the terrain to scale and then got the model of Vah Medoh and then put Vah Medoh in the spot so I could see how well she fit. And she fits quite well. I think it's really, really cool that there's just enough space for the legs of Vah Medoh, which are really landing gear for all intents and purposes, fit in there perfectly when folded up, as well as the kind of hemispherical shapes that you see on the underside of each wing, or towards the ends. And then naturally, keeping with this line of thought that the Sheikah would have probably chose this site because it was important to the Rito. That is my honest belief. Kind of like how Naboris is in Gerudo Canyon. I don't know the exact location, I've never looked, and I'm sure someone will correct me for saying this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was near Mount Naboru. Much in the same way, the Zora Waterworks are a feat of engineering built together with the kingdom, and Vairodamia is another good example of this, where they're buried at these sites that are of great importance to the different groups. And I wondered, what is it about this particular site? And so I started doing some analysis. One of the things that I did to start with this is I actually went and, starting at the ancient columns and then all the way up on, just look around the sites of Kuho Mountain and whatnot, and near a hill, and tried to establish where the ancient roads were, because there are paths there, and you can see that they're worth them leaving away from the roads and whatnot. And I ended up redrawing all of the roads on the map so I could get a sense of how the environment artist may have put this place together, etc. And here's that, and I'm gonna leave a link in the description to this map in case anybody wants it for their own interests. I'm a map nerd, so I'm assuming there may be somebody out there who's interested in this too. Someone make that available. And what I found is like a lot of the ancient roads tend to go around the site, generally speaking, or nearby rather. They don't go around it like they're avoiding it. And then I thought about the other lore that we have available for this area, being Tabantha, or as you might know from Minish Cap and in English, the Caster Wilds, which in Japanese in that game, this is Tabantha and Tanagar are actually, it's one of the two of them is in that game. Normally I would have this better prepared, by the way, but I have them hanging today and I was too excited to share this. So either way, one of those two is there and it ties it to this region. So this area would be like where the Caster Wilds would be, probably encompassing everything from the ancient column site north all the way to like Rosspro Pass, something like that. And if you're starting to see where I'm going with this, you probably picked up on me trying to find ties through the Wind Tribe, because the Wind Tribe, the Wind Ruins would be kind of on the south side of Caster Wilds. I don't recall at the moment if they're a separate, completely separate place from the Caster Wilds, are actually part of them, but they're south of the Caster Wilds, what official Caster Wilds map. And they, of course, look like it looks like a ruined area. And if you play that game and you go to the sky, you end up in the sky and you find that the Wind Tribe, who once inhabited the surface, were called, by their description, they were called to serve a higher purpose, which is to guard the wind element. And the Wind Fortress is in the sky and they can walk among the cloud tops because they're pure of heart, etc. also. And I've been looking for this link between the Wind Tribe and the Rito for a very long time now. There is almost no hard link, but there's some really good circumstantial evidence, and I want to share that today with you as well. So, if we take a look on Vah Medoh, on the front, there are various designs, and then on the wings, there are also some other interesting designs, and they don't always serve a functional purpose. They appear to be more decorative than functional, which is a little bit of a marked difference from a lot of other Sheikah-built things, where Sheikah tends to blend function and form together more often than not. There's like a purpose behind everything, and even if we don't know what all the purposes are, there are purposes behind everything that they do. And in the case of this, on the front side, we can see this really interesting symbol, and if you just flip it upside down, you have the sort of spiral wing crest that you see in and around the Wind Ruins and in the sky in the Minish Cap. And then on the wings, you have these two interlocking pieces of that form like I wouldn't quite say yin-yang because that's not right, but they kind of like do form a sort of interlocking thing. Now I guess to that, maybe like two interlocking magatamas, something like that. Anyway, this symbol can also be found too on the Wind Ruins. And this has been making me ask the question, did Rito ascend in the Stormwind Arc with the help, or after helping Izonai, who tumbled from the sky, and actually end up transforming into the people that we see today? Could this be an indicator that perhaps the Rito came about in prehistory, rather than as the result of any kind of evolution from the Zora? That's not to say that I think that that's wrong, what you hear in the adult timeline lore about the Zora becoming the Rito. I'm more stating that it's possible the Rito existed already at the point of the Great Flood in that branch, just to clarify my thoughts. There's another really interesting set of statistical kind of information that we can draw from here as well. The Wind Tribe are red-haired, and there's some symbols that they have inside of their houses or their structures that even resemble things that you find only in the Gerudo region in Air of the Wilds. And it's been thought for a pretty long time that maybe they either had a shared ancestor or that they were their same group ethnically, but perhaps not like split or something happened, some sort of like a schism, who knows. Anyway, one piece of information that we can call from here is that if you actually take a census of all of the Rito, which I have done, you would find that a good bit of them actually have a red coat. And why does that matter? Of course, because the idea being that if they had transformed, perhaps that's what's going on there, like that they had actually retained some of those qualities of the coat and whatnot. And that occurs in about 30% of all the Rito, with the next highest color being a white coat, which is only as high as like 9%. And then from there, the percentages get smaller. So the majority of Rito actually have a red coat. And I find that really fascinating. I think that could be a potential pointer to the idea that maybe the Rito were the outcome of the Wind tribe and their devout beliefs and practice, leading them to become who they became over time. And it would be totally out of the question. Zonai reincarnation practices may very well function the same way, especially now that we know that bubble frogs and the Satori are the result of reincarnation as the result of whether a person is enlightened or not, because like Satori are enlightened sages, whereas bubble frogs are reincarnated from people who had hearts filled with greed and things like that. So it's possible. I don't know if it's really true, and I certainly won't assert it to be such because I don't think that the evidence is good enough yet. I think this is pretty much on the fucking nose as far as evidence goes, though. So I won't assert it to be true, but I think it could be true. Anyway, I just wanted to take a minute to share this with you because I thought it was really, really cool. I have more research about this that was spawned as the result of me finding this and then doing immediate research to try and see what other kind of information I could find about it. And I hope to share that pretty soon. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this. And if you have any thoughts or theories of your own, I'd really love to hear from you. Drop them in the comments. Take care, friends. Until next time.